You're 52 years old, sitting in your car in an empty parking lot on an ordinary Tuesday morning. There's an envelope on the seat next to you. You open your banking app one more time before you go inside. The number on the screen is just over $1.2 million. Nobody else knows that number exists. Not your coworkers walking past your windshield right now with their coffee cups. Not your closest friend. Not even the person you've shared a bed with for over 20 years. In about 10 minutes, that's all about to change, but only a little, and only for one person. This is the story of how staying boring for 30 years quietly became the most interesting thing you ever did. Rewind 3 decades. You're 23, fresh out of a community college program, starting your first real job at a logistics company for $38,000 a year. Your desk is gray, your chair squeaks, and the guy next to you has been there for 5 years and talks about his motorcycle constantly. On your second Friday, your paycheck lands, and you do something nobody tells you to do. You open your phone, find your bank's app, and set up an automatic transfer, $200, moving out the day after every paycheck, into an account you can't easily touch. It takes about 3 minutes. You don't tell anyone. You don't even think about it again until the next paycheck, when it just happens automatically, the same way it will for the next 30 years. At 25, you get a small raise, $44,000 now. Your coworker, the motorcycle guy, finally buys the bike he's been talking about for 2 years. He brings photos to work, shows everyone, lets a few people sit on it in the parking lot. He tells you that you should loosen up a little, that money is meant to be enjoyed. You smile and say, maybe one day. You bump your automatic transfer up to $250 that same week. Nobody connects those two moments. You barely connect them yourself. At 27, you meet someone at a coworker's barbecue. Things move quickly. Within 2 years, you're married, in a small apartment, splitting bills for the first time. One evening, you sit together going through finances, combining bank statements, listing out student loan balances. You mention your checking account, your savings account for emergencies, your retirement contributions through work. You do not mention the separate brokerage account that's been quietly growing for 4 years now, sitting at just over $14,000. It doesn't feel like hiding something big. It feels like a detail that simply doesn't come up. That's the night the gap begins, not from a decision, but from an absence of one. At 29, the market has a terrible year. Everything drops sharply over a few weeks. Your $14,000 becomes closer to $9,000. You watch the number fall every time you check, which is more often than you'd like to admit. One night, unable to sleep, you sit at the kitchen table with your laptop, the account open, the sell button right there. You think about what $9,000 could fix right now. A better car, breathing room, the feeling of being done with the uncertainty. You sit with the cursor hovering for what feels like a long time. Eventually, you close the laptop without doing anything at all. You go to bed. You don't mention any of it the next morning. You don't fully understand yet that doing nothing on that particular night was the most important financial decision you'll ever make. At 32, you have your first child. The account, untouched through the downturn and the recovery that followed, has quietly grown past $40,000. Around this time, your spouse brings up the idea of moving to a bigger place. A real house instead of an apartment, with a yard for the baby. You look at the numbers together. The new mortgage payment would be significant, more than double what you're paying in rent now. You could technically help cover a larger down payment from your hidden account, which would make the move much easier. You don't mention that. Instead, you say you'd rather wait a year, build up more savings the normal way first. Your spouse is a little disappointed, but doesn't push. That night, lying awake, you think about the house, the yard, the version of this conversation where you simply said yes. You don't change your mind. This is the night the gap stops being small and starts being a pattern. At 36, your car is old enough that your oldest child, now 4, asks why it makes a funny noise. You tell them it's just old. That evening, you look up the price of a newer, reliable car, something you could pay for outright from the account, which now sits close to $90,000. You don't buy it. You keep driving the same car for 2 more years. Your spouse starts occasionally mentioning, lightly, that maybe it's time for an upgrade. You agree, in theory, and then nothing changes. At 38, sitting in your car before work one morning, you open the account out of habit, something you've started doing more frequently. The number has crossed $180,000. For the first time, you actually do the math seriously. You pull up a calculator and run the numbers. At your current contribution rate, with historically average market growth, what does this look like in 14 more years? The number that comes back is just over $1.2 million. You run it again. Same result. You sit there long enough that you're late for work for the first time in years. Walking in, your manager asks if everything's okay. You say traffic. Nobody in that building has any idea what just happened in the parking lot. At 42, your father passes away unexpectedly. He worked the same job for almost 40 years and retired with a small pension and a watch they gave him at his retirement dinner. At the gathering afterward, an old coworker of his asks what you do for a living. You give a short, simple answer, something in logistics, and he nods approvingly, calls it honest work, and moves on. You don't mention the number sitting in your account, now approaching $400,000. You don't mention that you're on track to retire decades earlier than your father ever could have. You go home and check the account that night out of habit. It went up while you were at the funeral. You feel strangely nothing about that. At 46, an old friend reaches out after years of barely speaking. You meet for coffee. They've had a rough stretch, lost a vehicle to repossession, going through a difficult separation, behind on bills. They ask, carefully, if you could help with a few $1,000s. You say yes without hesitation. That night you transfer the money from your regular checking account, which dips uncomfortably low for about a week. The other account, now past $600,000, doesn't move at all. Your friend, for years, made noticeably more money than you ever did. The difference, you realize, was never about how much came in. It was always about how much stayed. At 49, you're offered a significant promotion at work. More money, but also far more hours, more travel, more stress. You think about it for about a week. The extra income would get you to your number faster, maybe by a year or 2. But you turn it down anyway. Your manager is surprised. At home, your spouse eventually finds out about the offer secondhand, from someone else, and asks why you didn't mention it, and why you said no. You tell them you're happy where you are, which is true, but it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is sitting in an account they've never seen, now over $800,000. You don't say that part. There's a tense night. Things feel slightly different for a while. Then, slowly, things go back to normal, in the way things do when nobody brings something back up. 3 more years pass quietly. The account crosses $1 million on an unremarkable Friday afternoon. You're sitting in a parking lot, a different one, when you see the number. You sit there for a few minutes before driving home like nothing happened. And now you're back where this started. 52 years old, sitting in your car, an envelope on the seat, the number on your phone reading just over $1.2 million. In a few minutes, you're going to walk inside and hand that envelope to your manager. It's your resignation letter. Most of the people walking past your car right now have another 10 or 15 years of work ahead of them. You don't. The difference was never a better job, a bigger salary, or a lucky investment. The difference was one small transfer, set up on an ordinary Friday at 23, that you simply never turned off, through market crashes, missed cars, postponed houses, and 30 years of staying quiet about a number that was slowly becoming the only thing that actually mattered. You get out of the car, you walk inside, and for the first time in 30 years, today is going to be different.